I think of them almost like all like very structured short stories. Like I draw a lot from that genre and that experience of reading those things to, um, when I write in the longer form, and it's like how economical can I be with these descriptions and how impactful kind of thing, right? Like, what's the minimum amount of stuff to convey this world?
Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with author PJ Garcin. PJ, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Steve. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to come by. I know it's hard to get to make time sometimes because there's so many things going on in life, but so I appreciate you taking the time out of this evening.
Yeah, it's always a busy time, but yeah, happy to always come on and chat about books and stuff.
Awesome. So tell us about your book series, the KARDASHEV cycle.
Right. So yeah, so the KARDASHEV cycle is like a sci-fi series that is kind of like each book kind of has like a little slightly different flavor to it. Like it's a little bit of mix of space opera, a little bit of cyberpunk in there, and it's a 3-book series. So there's 2 books that are out now, and the third one is coming this year. I think it's soon, very very soon, and it's sort of set in our own solar system, and it's um, maybe it's not hard sci-fi, but it's based in reality. So it's grounded in real science and sort of then taken to the sort of the nth degree. And it sort of follows the idea where there's the KARDASHEV Corporation, who are the CEO, Alton Neal. He's hell bent on transforming our civilization into a Type 2 civilization. So if you're into sci-fi kind of thing, and sort of science research, the Kardashev scale is like a scale that measures like energy output of civilizations. So like Type 1 would be you can harness all the energy from your planet. Type 2 would be all the energy from your star. Type 3 would be from your galaxy. And so he's come up with this. They've developed this thing called a Dyson swarm, which is like, again, based on like a real thing. There's a real theory about this, that this is a thing that you could potentially build. And it basically is like a bunch of orbiting collectors that go around the sun to capture all of the energy output from it. And so he's doing this. People in the system, they don't like that very much, kind of thing, that this one guy controls all of the energy output from the sun and controls everything. And so there's obviously some conflict there. And then but the heart of the story is there's a young girl, Chim, who is sort of grew up in the belt on a mining station, and she's kind of thrust into the middle of this whole conflict, really against her will, kind of thing. She has very very early on, there's some tragedy in her family, and as a result of the actions of the Kardashev Corporation, kind of thing. And so this is kind of the dominoes start falling, and we get hopefully a very entertaining kind of like action adventure story that spans 3 books.
And with the books being rooted in real science, did you have someone double check the real science aspects of the story just to be sure you had it right?
Well, I definitely have very detail-oriented beta readers who will help and point those things out. And I definitely spent a lot of time double checking my math on things like travel times within the solar system, or double checking is this like really plausible? You know what I mean? Is this concept being explained properly? And is this is it believable? There's obviously some stuff in there that like stretches, you know, the boundaries of maybe what's possible, but it's always, you know, tried to start from a place of reality.
Mhm. And what's it feeling like with the third book coming out in a few months or the summer? What is it feeling like to wrap up the series? Did you have a physical response? Did you have like you could breathe again, or what was that like?
It was really like, I want to describe it. It's like, it's both like exciting, but also a little bit sad. Like it's a little bit bittersweet, right? Because you kind of get connected to these characters and you get like really connected with this world. And when you're, you know, when you're writing towards the end of it, you're like, I don't want this to end. You know what I mean? Like you know, and it also feels like, you know, the first book, you know, you're new to these characters, and by the third one, you're like, I know how to write these characters down. You know, I know them inside and out, and it's like, but at the same time, you know, their story arc is coming to completion, kind of thing. So yeah, it was like a mix. You know, I was excited. The third book was definitely the easiest for me to write. I think that we'll see if it's the easiest for me to finish editing. I'm in the middle of editing it right now. We'll see if that's always the hardest part. But it was definitely the easiest one to write. So it was, you know, exciting to be like, oh, I can see all the threads coming together, right? I can see, you know, the third one also, you know, has all like the payoffs, right? All of the, you know, the things that have been kind of brewing since the first book are getting, you know, paid off in the third one. So that's always exciting, but it's sort of sad to leave these characters and be like, oh, you know, now what am I going to do?
Yeah. Do you have any other projects you're working on, or kind of, you know, roaming your mind?
I have too many, probably too many. You know, I've been tossing around, like I have an outline for like some fantasy stories that I've been interested. I've been getting kind of back into fantasy. I was like, that's where I really started reading fantasy stuff when I was a teenager, and like, you know, really into all like the Forgotten Realms type of stuff. And you know, getting really into that. And I've been sort of getting back into it recently. I picked up The Witcher kind of thing. I played all the games and seen the show, and I was like, I should read the book. And the book's great too. So, you know, I've been sort of toying around with that. I also have this like one that I actually started writing that's like I don't know, want to call it like a retro computing story, like about like computing in the late 80s, early 90s, kind of a, you know, it's a little bit lower stakes kind of thing, but about that era and BBSs. Does anybody remember BBSs before the internet? You know, that, and like, you know, some kids who want to start up a BBS and all the hacking and stuff that goes around that. So that's been kind of fun, kind of thing to almost as like a palate cleanser kind of thing afterwards. So yeah, and my to be written list is huge. There's all kinds of stuff on it. So I'm kind of like dabbling in a few things. And you know, it's not necessarily the end, like that I would never return to the sort of KARDASHEV universe. It's sort of like, okay, there's 3, that story arc is complete now. Let's take a break kind of thing and try something else, and then maybe come back.
That late 80s, early 90s era is really interesting, isn't it? Because there were so many changes that happened in that time period. And, you know, if you go from like a BBS, which is, you go back and think about it now with, you know, 2400 baud modems, and it was a whole different world. And even then, if you were into it, it was like people thought you were some kind of wizard, because it was like, you know, what is a BBS, or what's a modem, or why does it make those funny sounds? It's
Yeah,
you know, it's amazing how far we've come.
it really is. Yeah, yeah. It's like, but there's something like kind of like now I think kind of exotic about all that kind of tech. You know, there's definitely like, there's now generations who have grown up completely without it, right? Like now who never had, you know, the dial-up experience, or the you know, or like even the way, you know, the computers were, like they were really quite cryptic in a way, you know what I mean? There was lots of, and I love all the antsy art from that era and the BBSs, like all that, and all that demo scene stuff, and like that whole era is just so, I don't know, there's just so much character to it. So that's something I really wanted to explore. I was obsessed. I wrote my master's thesis about BBSs and things like that, and so I've been always like obsessed with this kind of concept. And so, now it's just sort of writing it's a bit, lighthearted, lighthearted story kind of thing, but kind of just exploring the vibe of that era kind of thing. So we'll see where it goes. It's been fun. I've been like playing around with like, I worked in games for a while, and I'm working on like a BBS simulator kind of thing. I don't know if you want to call it like a completely like simulating like the 2400 baud speed of rendering it, and like I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, but it's pretty fun to work on. But yeah, we'll see.
Oh, that fills me with joy to think about that. But even back then, now you just install a game and you download it from Steam or whatever from a service, and you're ready to go. And back then you were, I have to edit my autoexec.bat or my config sys to make this work, and it took effort to make
it. Did. Yeah, like and that's what I mean, sort of cryptic. It's like you had to know the incantations to load your mouse driver in high memory or something. So you had the memory to look at this game, and and like there's all kinds of crazy things, like the games used to come on like two different disc size. You'd have like the 3.5-inch disc and the 5.25, and like I can remember friends about it. We would trade them. We'd be like, "Oh, I've got the 3.5-inch. I'll trade you for the 5." I don't have that size disk drive, or and we won't even talk about the amount of pirated games that everybody had, like entire things of like copied games, and it was just a really fascinating. And then shareware games and stuff, like where like Doom, right? Like was, you download it and you can play it for free, and then you like mailed a check for like $40 to these guys. It was just like such a weird thing when you think back on it, the way it is now, right? Where you just go to Steam and you're like, I'm going to download 400 gigabyte game or whatever, right?
Like, yeah, it's a totally different world. It's amazing. It's really cool to think back on those. I mean, while I miss them, it was kind of a pain in the ass at the same time. So
yeah. It can be, it's fun to look through rose-colored glasses kind of thing, to be like, oh, let's romanticize this kind of thing.
Yeah, but if we went back and we were trying to get on a BBS, and I'd be like, hurry up! I'm like, I don't have.
I think I did the math recently, and it's like, I think like current like gigabit connection compared to like 2400 baud is like, I don't know, like 1 million times faster or something. Like it's a lot faster.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's nice to think about, but I'm not sure if I'd want to go back. But
no, not for very long. Yeah.
No, it wouldn't last very long. So, what made you decide to write a book? What was it that finally got you to take that step and say, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do this.
Right. So, I mean, I've been writing stuff my whole life. Like, when I was like a little kid, I had like notebooks full of crazy stories and plays and, crazy stuff like that. And so, and I've always been kind of writing, all the time throughout my life kind of thing, like writing, whether it's stories or, I failed attempts at novels kind of thing. And that's, I think everybody who's been a writer has a giant pile of shame kind of thing, of things that have never finished. But I think for me, like what was different this time is, I did change my approach, because I'm constantly coming up with like ideas to try out, but I changed my approach this time. And I think prior I would have been, they call a pantser, right? Like I would have been like, I just kind of sat down and started writing and see where it took me. But this time I was like, no, after years of working in games and working like, learning how to like ship things, that like, it's really a skill kind of thing, is learning how to ship things. Is like, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try a different approach. I'm going to treat this the same way that I, worked on, large video game franchises, and so I did an outline, and I changed to outlining. So this time, before I wrote a single line of prose, I had every chapter mapped out with the beats that were like, Tim does this in this chapter, Both and Neil does this. And then what I think what that really benefited me is that when I sat down to write, I only had to focus on the performance of writing, right? Like the sort of like artistic performance, versus, having to worry like, oh, am I introducing a plot hole? Like, is this going to have enough like meat on it to actually sustain? I didn't have to worry about anything. I knew that all the plot holes were filled, all of the things were sustained, so I could just focus on that performance. And that's like, that's really something that I learned a lot when I was, I did audio direction in games for a number of years. So I did a lot of voiceover direction with like actors and like broadcasters and stuff. And one of the things I really learned was like, you need to like kind of create this environment where people don't have to think through these things, where they can just, kind of relax and do what they do best, right? And be like, and be able to trust the process, like trust that this is going to work. You know what I mean? Like, okay, it's kind of weird that I'm gonna like get excited as if they just scored a winning goal and like, say a bunch of stuff. But if they understand the context of this, then they can trust that it's going to work, and then they can get a really good performance. And that's something that, again, I just sort of try to apply to my own process. Is like, okay, if all of the other things are figured out and I don't have to worry about them, then when I sit down to actually write, then I can get a good performance.
With an outline that you had mapped out before, how often would you change the outline as you went? Was it pretty often, or was it something that you tried to stick to?
Pretty rarely, I would say. Like, I mean, not never. There's definitely been a few times, especially in the third book. Like, I changed it a lot more in the third book, mostly for pacing purposes, not like fundamentally like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, this is like way off base, but mostly like, oh, you know what? Like, this needs to happen later, or this needs to happen, because you need to sort of distribute some of like the high intensity moments, and you also have to like sometimes pay them off earlier so that a later plot point makes sense, kind of thing, right? And feels earned and all this kind of stuff. So I would change it sometimes for pacing. I did change in the second book. I changed a plot point where initially one character was one way, like, I don't want to give spoilers, but like, there was one character who, you know what I mean? It was really like, there was, ultimately there would have been a cold-hearted betrayal kind of thing in this book. And then when I came to actually write that, I was like, it really doesn't work. Like, it doesn't feel true to the way that character's been written, kind of thing, throughout this. And so I had to kind of like adjust that whole storyline to sort of suit the kind of truth of that character when they were on the page. So
yeah, it's different approaches. It's amazing how much they change the end result. Just how you approach something like this, especially creatively, makes a big difference. And I did notice that the book is on Kindle Unlimited, and I wondered, what are the pros and cons that you've seen with Kindle Unlimited?
Right. Yeah. So, the books currently are all on Kindle Unlimited. They will actually very soon be coming out of Kindle Unlimited for a short period, like a kind of a test period of time. One of the challenges is that there are some people who, are like, well, I don't read my stuff on a Kindle, and I don't buy my stuff from Amazon, and you have to be exclusive with Amazon when you have the Kindle Unlimited. And so, obviously, percentage of markets, like Amazon is a very large percentage of market. They're not a huge, but it does feel like, for me, I'd be like, I would like those people to have an opportunity to read the book, kind of thing, and to have access to that and to get into it. So I am looking at sort of trying to make them available wider. It's also, though, like, it's a lot of work. There's like a lot more stores. I mean, there's services like Draft to Digital and stuff like that, but like, it's more things to manage. So, when I was starting out, my sort of strategy was like, okay, I'm gonna stick with Amazon. I just need to focus on this. It's not my full-time job. So it's like how do I scope this down so that it will be manageable, kind of thing. The great thing though is it makes it so easy for people to pick it up, right? People who are on Kindle Unlimited, they can try it out and and just kind of discover this, hopefully this new world that they fall in love with. And that's like what that's something that for me is exciting, kind of thing. So we'll try this kind of thing probably over the summer, but it may only be a limited time thing. It's tough to say, kind of thing. I think one of the awesome things is that you can experiment with this stuff, right? You can switch back and forth, and you can try. There's lots of avenues as an author, kind of thing, to be able to experiment with these different approaches.
And I also wanted to ask you, because I think everyone's journey is different. Everyone's publishing journey is a little different, and I wondered, what was your publishing journey like from step one to now? I mean, how much I'm sure you've learned a ton about it, but what was that process like?
Right. So I would say that my publishing journey actually started back when I was working in games, and so we were working on we were working on various licensed titles, kind of thing, with large publishers that you would all know the name of, kind of thing, and they so I had like a lot of firsthand experience with what publishing contracts look like, because in video games it's the exact same model, kind of thing, right? It's the exact same advance against royalties model, kind of thing, and there's cross collateralization across multiple titles, and all. It's exactly the same, the model, and so basically, I'd sort of seen kind of firsthand what that looks like. Obviously the scale is different, right? The expense of building a game is a lot higher than writing a book. And like distribution costs are higher and all this kind of stuff. But, in general, the structure is exactly the same. And then we'd started out as like Steam became more popular. We started experimenting with doing, and at App Store and stuff, with doing self-published titles on Steam and on the App Store and stuff. And we surprisingly saw quite a lot of success with that. And learned, I learned a lot in my role as executive producer there. I learned a lot of about the publishing side of the business, and what does it take to not just develop the thing, but like to take it to market and grow an audience and get exposure and all that kind of stuff. And so we did a number of sort of self-published titles that were quite early access, all that kind of stuff, that were quite successful. And so when I switched over to I was writing books, I was like, I'm going to try to replicate that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to take that same route, you know what I mean? Where I have, again, it's not for everybody. Like, I already had like years of experience, like bringing things to market, like knowing, how to deal with, contractors and outsourcers and legal and, all the stuff like about, how to like prepare stuff and distribute it, and like, deal with like portals and, stuff that, especially if you're not technical, like can seem really like probably overwhelming. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I don't understand any of this stuff. Like, how does it work? And so that was for me, that was the route where I was like, I'm going to try to sort of replicate that kind of, what that experience that we had. And, there's lots of benefits. Like, I'd also seen like how slow, like, I mean, books move really way slower than video games, but video games move slow too, right? Like where, the rate of pushing things out is quite, prolonged, and the rate of things, and like the the amount of creative control that you can maintain, you know what I mean, that you can maintain is different. And, I've definitely firsthand experienced that where, we've come up with a concept, made a demo, pitched it to a publisher, got it published, got it, shipped it, all that. And so, yeah, have very firsthand experience with like what that can look like, kind of thing, in terms of the, you know what I mean, the amount of control that you give up and that kind of thing. And so for me, where this is like, definitely a passion project, the KARDASHEV cycle, and like, doing something that's, very, very non-technical. That's another thing I like about writing is like, there's no bugs, doesn't crash, doesn't introduce crashes. I work in software still, and like, there's no like weird crashes that keep you up at night and like you debugging for weeks on end and all this kind of stuff. So it's like very non-tech. It's just like something that I can own. And so that was like the approach that I took, and I've really enjoyed it, kind of thing. And obviously it's the other thing is I realize it's a long road. You know what I mean? It's not you're not going to put it out there and 1 million people are going to download it, right? It takes time to build an audience and to build a readership and build that trust. But it's been really, really satisfying to see people pick it up and discover it and enjoy it, kind of thing. So that's great.
You're not going to get anyone who says, when I turn page 198 to 199, I get this error.
Yeah, exactly.
But really, sometimes it happens, not all the time.
Yeah,
that's kind of nice. And so when in your experience, when a video game is done, like a self-published video game versus a self-published book, how has gaining an audience been different? How is that approach different when it's finished? How is to kind of get it out into the world and let people know about it? How different is that?
Oh, that's a really good question. Like, for one, I think books is like much harder in a way. Like, in some ways it's easier because like the price point is lower, and there's things like Kindle Unlimited, you know what I mean, where you have lots of like easy entry points for people. But the tough part is it's much more saturated compared to video games, right? Like, people talk about the App Store being saturated or Steam being saturated, but like, it's really like orders of magnitude different, right? Like, I think there's like 8 million things or something, 10 million things on KDP, right? Like, whereas like number of things on Steam is still numbered in the thousands, right? So, maybe tens of thousands now, right? But it's like not. App Store is different, right? The App Store obviously is like, there are millions of things on the App Store, but App Store is very difficult to get discovery on. So I think that's one thing that's been different, right? Is that there's more, not noise to cut through, but there's, you know what I mean? And there's also like so many niches, kind of thing, which actually I love, I think is amazing, because you can find people who like, this is made for them, right? There's so many amazing like micro niches. And so, that's been really great. But I think that in general, there's a lot of similarities really in terms of, it's really just like, helping get it out there so that people can find it, chatting about it, kind of thing. And then also like supporting it, right? Like, it's not something you can just like one and done. You can't just like put it out, forget about it, and cross your fingers and hope it's like something you have to continuously support. And you're especially with a series, it's more like, I think it's more like DLC, right? It's like, okay, here's the first one, you know what I mean, and then here's the other ones, kind of thing, in this series, kind of thing. So it's like a long-term support for that series. And that's the same, the series that we had, that we did self-published, like, we supported it for a really long time with like free updates and free content and stuff. So that's an approach that, has been the same that I've applied here.
Yeah, it is. It seems like writing is the first step. And after that, it's a whole nother journey that you're kind of embarking on.
Yeah, it really is. Like, that was the thing, I think, even, being, you know, being a trained writer, do you know what I mean? I went to school and took writing class. I worked in a creative field. All this stuff. It still surprised me how much work editing was. You know what I mean? And how much more work it was than writing it. Kind of thing. Like, I think the first book took me 3 to 4 months to write the first draft, and then 2 years to edit it. Kind of thing. So. It took me a really long time. Now, obviously, the second one went way faster, right? I did the whole second one from beginning to end in about a year. And then this one definitely about the same kind of thing. Maybe I'll come out ahead. We'll see. It's to be, we'll see. We're not across the finish line yet. I don't want to jinx it. Yeah.
And we've been with some friends lately. We've been talking about genres and subgenres, and as an author, what are your thoughts on genres and subgenres? Or does it make it more difficult to get your book out there and kind of to pinpoint who might be your target audience when there's so many subgenres, or is it helpful to have subgenres?
I think it is a blessing and a curse. Like I said, it is awesome to have the subgenres for those, but at the same time, you risk, like, if you're too narrow, you risk some people never seeing it if you don't hit one of those broad genres kind of thing. Like, this is the other aspect I think that's new to this whole thing that people don't, is like algorithm optimization, I suppose is maybe the term for it. Like search algorithms and TikTok algorithms and all this stuff is like where keywords like matter, and and so one of the things that I've really struggled with a little bit with the book is that, the book is definitely, like, I would describe it as YA friendly kind of thing, right? But it's not like, I never wrote it explicitly to be a YA book kind of thing. And so I really struggle with, should I put it in the YA category or should I not? You know what I mean? Like, because it's not like, it's kind of, it's YA friendly. Like there's no swearing or no hardcore swearing. And there's no like, gratuitous kind of violence or anything like that in it. And it's like, and the main character is like a young girl, she's like 16, 17. It's vague. It's, you know what I mean? But like, like a teenager. So, it does line up with some of the things, but sometimes I feel like those genre boundaries are too strict kind of thing. But they can be very helpful, right? Because it helps people like have a shorthand of like, am I going to like this, right? Yeah. Oh, this is a space opera romance or whatever. Oh, great, I want that. You know what I mean? Or it's a horror thriller kind of thing. Oh, I want that one kind of thing, right? So.
Yeah, it is tough, and it's funny that you mentioned YA because there's so many people that love YA that you can that would enjoy it, but then it may also turn some people off. So it's which way do you go with that? That's a tough one for sure. And you mentioned your main character. What makes a character compelling?
Any character? You mean what makes any character compelling?
Yeah. What makes you latch onto a character?
I think that a character who has a bit of a challenge kind of thing to them that you want to see through. It's like, oh, I want to see how they deal with this kind of thing. And they obviously have to be relatable in some way. I've seen a lot of debates about like, oh, does your main character have to be likable? Like, I think they have to be maybe likable is too broad of a term, but like they have to be relatable, right? You have to have some connection with them. Like, oh, I've gone through something similar, or I empathize with that, right? There has to be some empathy there with that character. But then, for me, it's like, how is this character going to grow kind of thing, right? And what is going to be that journey that you're going to watch? Because that's really like when you step back, right? And this is sort of, I've described, this series this way as well, is like, step back from the gravity weapons and Dyson swarms and space battles and robots and all that kind of stuff. And it's really a story about family, right? It's about, you know what I mean, a young girl who is like, you know, on her own in this gigantic, complex, dangerous universe. And she's being kind of thrust into responsibilities that maybe she's not ready for, kind of thing. Or maybe she is, kind of thing. And like, how can she grow into that role, kind of thing, where she's now become, at the center of this kind of interplanetary conflict. And and then, obviously there's also I think mystery is important too, right? Where, she uncovers like a mystery about her family that she, is kind of revealed, and she's like, oh, I didn't know this. And she, tries to understand what that is. But it's not so much like figuring the clues. It's like more about discovering who she is, right? It's like, oh, this is a huge part of me that I don't know. And solving this mystery will help me understand this and grow and complete my journey.
Mm-hmm. And through this journey of getting your books written and published and edited, and published, who has been your biggest supporter?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I've had a lot of really great support from a lot of people. Obviously, like my family, like my wife and my kids, like really, they're very supportive of this kind of thing. And, they're my first alpha readers, kind of thing. They'll read it before, even before it's like probably fit to be read, kind of thing. Right. So they're willing to look past the awkward phrasing and typos and stuff. But I have a few beta readers as well who, are amazing who will read it, before I send it to my editor, and who will, give me unvarnished and detailed feedback, kind of thing to say. So, it really is like, it's a team effort, kind of thing. But yeah.
Nice. Writing with your main character being a teenage girl, did you ever ask your kids or someone of that age and say, would a teenager say something like this? Did you ever ask them that?
For sure. Yeah. Like, my daughters are very, very, very easy. They're very quick to give me feedback, kind of thing. Right. And like avid readers and stuff. So they know, you know what I mean? Like, they know these genres in and out, and they're quick to say like, nah, that's no good, Dad. That's, yeah, like, no, this needs to be more of this, less of this, kind of thing. So yeah,
it's great to get that honest feedback, though. I mean,
oh yeah, without you really need feedback, and you need to figure out how to incorporate it, kind of thing, and how to integrate that into your process. It's so critical, because some of the things is you can't predict. It's not that you don't necessarily have to do everything that people say, but like, one of the things that we always say, I work in product management and software every day, is like, users they're never usually right about what the solution is to the problem, but they're always right that there is a problem. If they're telling you there's something wrong, they're right. They're just usually not that good at giving you the solution, kind of thing, right? So I think the same applies in writing. You know what I mean? Is that it's like, okay, you're saying that there's a problem with this scene or this character or this whole story arc. I need to go back and I need to address that. And so that's I take that stuff seriously and make sure that I integrate that. And sometimes it's like it's funny how like sometimes it doesn't even require a massive rewrite. I think that a lot of people will get afraid of feedback, like, oh no, now I'm going to start over, right? And it's like sometimes it's not. Sometimes like you can change the way a whole thing feels with just one paragraph or something, or like changing a few words, and then suddenly people read it and like, oh yeah, it's totally different now. And so it's you have more levers than you think, I think, with this stuff, where you don't always have to like throw it out and start over.
And speaking of your process, what is your creative process?
Yeah, so I mean, I generate a ton of ideas, like a sort of, you know, endless stream, way more ideas than I can possibly do. But usually there's like some that will stick, right? And then I'm like, oh, there's something here, right? And so usually it used to be that I would just jump in and try to explore it, but now I'm much more measured about it, right? I'm much more uh, deliberate. Like I said about the outlining, I will usually then try to outline. So with this like fantasy idea I had, the first thing I was like, okay, let's try to outline this. Where does this go? Is there enough? Because one of the things that's challenging, especially if you're writing novels, is like, is there enough meat on the bones of this subject to sustain, a novel or a series kind of thing, right? And I think I kind of lucked out with the Kardashev cycle where, I was like, oh yeah, it'll be cool. It'll be like a series, and I was like, there's plenty here, kind of thing, and I definitely lucked out, but it could have easily been like, dried up in the beginning of book 2, and you're like, oh, now what am I going to do, right? So, so then I usually follow that outline, and then then I'll try to draft a bunch of chapters, and usually I can know fairly quickly if it's going to work, kind of thing now, like where I'll write a bunch of chapters, and then if it seems good, I'm like, oh, this is working, then I'll be like, I'm going to keep doing this. But sometimes you do it and you're like, this is not, I'm not sure about this one. So, it goes back into the pile.
And with a genre like science fiction, I'm guessing that, because as a reader, you have to introduce the reader into this whole new world and kind of set the rules and the limits or whatever. So how do you build a world for your readers?
Yeah. And this is a tricky one, because I'm like a impatient reader. So, I'm actually, I'm don't love like the giant tomes kind of thing of lore and world building, and some series have this and people love it, kind of thing. And but I one of my favorite genres, I'm going on a tangent here, but I trust me, it connects, kind of thing. So one of my favorite genres of fiction to read is like literary short stories, kind of thing. So literary short stories to me are like the like absolute, like kind of perfect, like form of writing, in a way. Like they're so chiseled and so dense that you can get a sense of the worlds, because in this, you don't have a huge number of pages. You can get a sense of the world in very short order, with very well crafted sentences, and very like well placed sentences, and like the structure and like character actions and character dialogue can convey a lot, way more than like an info dump can. And it's like understanding what there's a lot of information that's like really fun and cool as a writer when you're researching. You're like, oh, and it does this and it works like this. But sometimes like when you're reading it, like that's actually not that. You're like, okay, like, I'm interested in the you know what I mean, the story beat here. But it's like, how can you introduce those things via the story beats, right? How can you get those things? Can the characters build your world, kind of thing? And how can you do it in the most like economical way possible, kind of thing? So like my books, like they have very short chapters. Maybe I have no attention span, I don't know. But they have very short chapters, and they're very like, I think of them almost like all like very structured short stories. Like I draw a lot from that genre and that experience of reading those things to, when I write in the longer form, and it's like, how economical can I be with these descriptions, and how impactful, kind of thing, right? Like, what's the minimum amount of stuff to convey this world? And maybe, might not always be successful, right? But I think that it can be very impactful. And I think that people can get like a feel for the world, rather than, necessarily an academic understanding of it, kind of thing.
Interesting. That's a good point. I can be an impatient reader. I love short chapters. I'm a big fan of short chapters. I love the short chapters.
Well, yeah. So I've had a lot of feedback that people really do like that. So, all of the books are, the chapters are usually sub 1,500 words for sure. Like of every chapter, probably minimum 800. So some 800 to 1,500 probably is the range.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a fan of the short chapters. If you were in your world, would you survive?
Ooh, that is um, maybe, but it depends on where, right? It depends on where, the one of the things like the half of this, I'd say sort of half of the story takes place like in space. So like in the asteroid belt or on the moon or places like that. Um, and one of the things that, I one of the details of the world that I sort of, keep picking on in the descriptions and in the character actions and stuff is like actually like kind of how hard it is to live out there, like in space, and like how it's not really like you think, you know what I mean? It's like, it's hot, it's cold, it's dusty, it's, like there's not much gravity kind of thing. And, gravity sickness is like a major plot point in the second book kind of thing of, these characters who lived their whole lives in space come to Earth, and it's like, okay, but you can't just do that, right? Like if you've lived your whole life in space, you come to Earth, like you're going to be in like for a world of hurt with gravity that you're not used to, or if you've grown up microgravity, not necessarily 0 G, but like microgravity. And so that aspect of it is very difficult kind of thing. But um, the future in the book is like alarmingly not that different from the present, like in the sense that like especially on Earth, people still have jobs and stuff like that, but it's sort of like it talks about like a utopia where one of the big concepts is that they have jobs, but they have robot proxies to do their job. So it's this idea where, okay, we still have the same economic system and ever. It's just that, some people or most people, you know what I mean, can, purchase a robot. And there's a short story in like, so on my mailing list, you can sign up and get short stories. One of the short stories is about Chim's grandmother who inherits money and then uses it to get a mortgage on a robot. This idea that a robot is like a generational purchase kind of thing that will like free you from, having to work kind of thing. And then later on in like book 2, Chim meets up with this character, and his family doesn't have that kind of, privilege. And, it has never occurred to her that, you know what I mean? That, not everybody has a robot. Oh, like, and so, there's a lot of things that are the same and a lot of things that are different. And so depends on where I might survive, depending on where. It depends if I have a robot, if I have a robot to work for me. But then this is like the central thing is like, you've got to keep that robot in working order. Otherwise you're on the hook to do the work. And that's really the catalyst for the entire chain of events, is that her robot breaks down in the first chapter of the first book, and her father has to sub in for this robot on a dangerous spacewalk, and stuff happens.
It can be a blessing and a curse for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do write, do you listen to music?
I do. Yeah. I listen to a lot of instrumental music kind of thing, because I find if it has lyrics, it will distract me. But yeah, I have like playlists for, and it's funny, like each of the books have different playlists. So like the first book, I was listening to a lot of like orchestral music or soundtracks kind of thing. Like I had like Blade Runner soundtrack or something like that in there, or The Expanse or TV show thing, or like or Star Wars or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, a whole mishmash of like, you know, kind of like a random playlist of like movie music kind of thing, right? But in the second book, which is like Set on Earth, is a lot more cyberpunk. Shout out to the band The Midnight, who like I basically listened to all of their albums. They post instrumental versions of their albums, and it's like 80s synthwave style, and it's awesome. It's so good. And I basically listened to all of their albums like repeatedly in the second one, and then the third one's like a mishmash of everything, you know. So, yeah, I definitely listen to a lot of music. I think music's big for me.
If you could pick a favorite album or favorite albums that you can listen to over and over again, never get tired of, what would those albums be?
Ooh, you mean not in the context of writing, but just like in general, Wow, that is so many. So, yeah, and like, you know, my music taste is super eclectic. Okay, I'll try to pick a couple albums that I would never ever get sick of.
Okay.
Would be like Octung Baby by U2, probably.
Can't go wrong.
Nevermind by Nirvana. And I'll give a shout out to The Midnight. Literally any of their albums, I've listened to them so many times. But you know, so like, yeah, whether it's Days of Thunder or Monsters or any of these albums, they're all amazing kind of thing. So nice. I listened to them so many times, they definitely passed the repeat test kind of thing. So yeah.
So I have a couple more questions for you. I like to finish things off on, you know, kind of a goofy note. But
sure. Yeah.
Was there ever a hobby or a thing that you were really excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
Ooh, hobby or thing that I was really excited to try and I tried it and I did not enjoy it. I'm completely drawing a blank. I mean, I definitely probably have tried a lot of sports. So here's the okay. So here, one of the last games we made was a snowboard game. So I'm a big skier. I've skied like my whole life. One of the last things games we did was a snowboard game, and I was like, oh, we should all learn to snowboard kind of thing, right? And we work with pro snowboarders and everything like that, right? And I was like really excited to try snowboarding, and I actually really, really enjoy it if the conditions are good. But now as I age, if the conditions are bad, which they often are here on the East Coast, I'm too old for the falls and the slams, and it's too hard on my old body. So I've like in recent years retreated back to skiing kind of thing, because I don't fall as much kind of thing, because I'm like, so it's like, as much as I loved it and really excited about it, I was like, I keep falling, and I'm gonna hurt myself seriously one of these times.
Yeah, you have to weigh that. Is it worth the risk?
Yeah. Is it worth the risk? Every injury at this point, it could be a career ender kind of thing. So
yeah, it could get you. Okay, so the next one I have is, if the zombie apocalypse started today, what would be your weapon of choice?
What would be my weapon of choice? Well, kids have been getting into softball recently. Maybe it's a baseball bat. I don't know. That's a tricky one, but it's definitely the most fun one to play in like Left 4 Dead or something like that, right? So
yeah. And do you prefer fast or slow zombies?
Fast, like like in 28 Days Later kind of thing, like the running zombies or whatever kind of thing. So
they're so much scarier, I think, when they run.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of thing. I think they're definitely terrifying if they're running.
Yeah. You can't just have a mild jog and get away.
No, and there's more chance for you to trip. All those all those things.
Yeah, be a buffet. So do you have a favorite family recipe?
Favorite family recipe? These are amazing questions. Um, Favorite family recipe? Um, that is a really good question. There's so many. I think it's like it would be really probably there's some desserts that I think are probably, you know, there's like whether it's, certain types of squares or cookies or something like that. One of those I I think would be hard to choose kind of thing, but it's probably like some kind of dessert recipe, like, that kind of thing.
Can't go wrong with dessert. And so, what was your first job?
Oh, what was my first job? Paper route kind of thing. Is that really, yeah, that
Yeah.
count as a job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, probably delivering newspaper, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and kind of filling the bag and going out in the cold and delivering the papers. I don't think that even that doesn't exist anymore, kind of thing. Is
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it does or not. I'm not sure.
I don't know how that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. But what did you learn from that experience from the paper route?
What did I learn from that? I think I learned, I guess, like how to, I think, how to interact with customers a little bit, like, because you have to collect, you know what I mean? So that was the hardest part. The delivering the papers and waking up wasn't the hard part. Hard part was like going to people and be like, you have to pay your bill, and you're like a little kid, you know what I mean? And people would not pay their bill and stuff. It's like, what? Are you crazy? I'm like 8 or something. I don't know how old I was. I don't remember.
Jeez. Wow. Did you have to threaten to break legs, or was that just a movie thing?
I think my mother did. Yeah. Yeah. I think she was the heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. She's the big guns. So something I always like to ask all of my guests is, if the roles were reversed and you were in my position, was there a question that you would have asked that I did not ask?
What would I have asked? I don't know. Maybe just, something about who my favorite authors were or something like that. Maybe, I don't know.
So who are your favorite authors?
So are my favorite authors. Okay. So, like I said, pretty eclectic reader, obviously, like, I've read, I've got all the big sci-fi ones on there, like Asimov and stuff like that. I love all that kind of stuff. But I also like I was saying, I read lots of like literary fiction kind of things. So like, short stories by like Jorge Luis Borges and stuff like that. Amazing, just like, and it's like all kind of sci-fi-ish too, right? It's like just amazingly constructed. And then like Canada also like super punches above its weight for literary authors, right? So many amazing, especially short story authors too, like Alice Munro or Alistair MacLeod, and like kind of, or Thomas King, amazing author for short stories kind of thing. So there's so many, so many that I've really enjoyed over the years kind of thing. So those are maybe ones that are maybe a bit more unique than just rattling off Asimov, etc.
Yeah, I've connected with a lot of Canadian authors in the last 6 months or so. There's a ton of you out there. So
Canada, for some reason, Canada really punches above its weight. I think it's really, there's not that many of us. You know what I mean? But there's lots of amazing talent in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've talked to a few of them, and it's interesting that the differences with the difference in the publishing experience being in Canada versus being in the States or another part of the world. So it's really interesting how different it can be when it's just right there. So
yeah, it's very, very different, especially like for traditional publishing, like there's much fewer, you know what I mean, like the space in Canada is like much smaller kind of thing compared to the US, where it's much more expansive. There's fewer agents in Canada. There's fewer, just fewer of everything, right? So it's a different. There are a lot of amazing like small presses in Canada that are, especially in this part of the country. There's like on the East Coast here. There's a lot of really amazing regional publishers who are picking up, publish like poetry, or they publish like regional kind of fiction or regional like historical things, and there's like some really high quality stuff that comes out.
Interesting. So thanks for coming by and to come and chat with me for a bit. I think we can go on for a couple hours if you want. But if someone wants to connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
Right. So probably the best place to start is my website, which is pjgarcin.com. And there you can like sign up for my mailing list. You'll find links to all the books, lots of information about the books. When book 3 comes out, you'll see that. So if you sign up for the mailing list, you'll get an update, obviously, when the 3rd book comes out. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Rocktron, RAWKTRON. And I'm reasonably active on there, kind of, reasonably active. I'm not super active on some of the other ones, but I am on there. You can find me, and most of that stuff's all linked from the website.
Nice, and I'll leave all those links down below on the podcast or on YouTube in the description, so that people can check out your work and connect with you.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you having me on. It's great to chat. Yeah, because we definitely could keep going, but great to chat and delve in.
Yeah, let me know when we'd like to do it again. We'll set something up.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me on, and have a great day.
You too. Thanks, everybody.